Hooray! And good afternoon to you all. Thank you for being here. How many people here, this is your very first time at Yidstock? Look at that. Like a third of the people here. Well, I'm here this afternoon, as you probably know, with Josh Dolgin, a.k.a. Socalled. And we're going to chat a bit. We're going to listen to some music, look at some pictures, and we'll turn it over at some point to your questions and what you would like to know from Josh. And we'll do this all in about 45 minutes, after which we will all leave the room and do the next thing that we're going to be doing. So, Josh, how are you?
Not bad.
Good to see you live
How's
in
the
person.
mic? Is it working a little bit? Good. Awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
Josh, I was thinking this morning, yesterday, in preparation for our talk, how at this point, you've done so many things. You're like, you may be familiar with bits and pieces of what Josh does, but it spans like every possible performance type theater, both also as a creator and performer, theater, music, music being composer, producer, musician, instrumentalist, amazing vocalist, also the scholarship behind what you do. It just goes on and on and on. I haven't even touched on everything. You also photography and maybe other kinds of visual art perhaps that we'll hear about. So first of all, mazel tov on all of that. Josh is one of the most talented and creative people in contemporary Yiddish culture. So how did all this happen? Like, were you just born this way? Was it nature or nurture?
Well, it's so weird to talk about this now. It's such a strange time after the pandemic, where I certainly, and probably you, and well, most definitely all of us, were sitting around not doing what we normally did in life. And for me, it was really a deep existential moment of crisis, like the deepest, where I just didn't know what I did or what I was useful for in the world. And like, sure, I'd done all these other things in the past, and I certainly worked hard to develop and create so many things. But like in the moment of those 2 years, it was like, it didn't matter. It was all this weird, that was a memory of a lost life. And and it made me think, am I a creator? Am I a pianist? Am I a singer? What's the point of any of that? Why learn new songs? Will I ever sing them for people? And I guess now that it's over, but it's not over, by the way. In fact, Quebec, I live in Montreal, and it's just entered the 7th wave officially from the government. So it ain't over. People's patience for it is over. We don't want to do anything about it anymore. The government reaction is over. The mandates and measures are over. But it's not over, and for performing artists, it's not over, because at every turn, our livelihood and what we are supposed to be doing is in peril. And we're sort of the first to go. Because it's not a powerful business lobby, I guess. I don't know. We could discuss why the arts were hit so hard from the pandemic. So, how did it happen? That's a story of just. What did you ask? Was I born this way?
Yes.
As a little kid, I guess I was always interested in creativity and doodling and doing cartoons and playing music. and my grandfather from Romania was like an amateur magician. I actually never knew him. I didn't meet him. He died before I was born. But he lived in Winnipeg. But I heard this sort of mythical story of this grandfather who did magic tricks. And there was a couple little magic tricks from his collection that I inherited. And so I got into magic tricks. And then my other grandfather was an amateur mandolin player, so I heard about that. And then my mother just forced me to take piano lessons. It's an old story, and with me it was really true. I was forced, I was bribed, I was coerced to keep practicing the piano, but I was talented. I had a really good ear, which meant that I never really learned how to read music very well because I just learned everything by ear, and in that way I learned classical piano and entered competitions, and eventually I was allowed to take jazz, to learn about jazz and improvisation, and not just do classical piano, and that really got me just hooked on my own. I didn't need to be bribed anymore to go to piano lessons. I was bribed with McDonald's was the main bribery, because we weren't really, I grew up in the country, and so going to McDonald's was a huge treat. It was also a method of bribing me to go to Hebrew school. Okay, we'll stop for a McChicken after Hebrew school. Okay, well, we can do that.
Right.
So piano and music started like that. And then in high school, I started to be allowed to join bands. And I started to join sort of world music bands in the big city of Ottawa, which was 20 minutes from where I grew up in the country, in the Gatineau Hills, just north of Ottawa. So, okay, I started to join these weird, like, world music bands through my piano teacher. I sort of met these music communities. I was in a salsa band. I was in a gospel band. I was in this Peruvian band. And so I started to think about world music. And also just thinking about music was because of the record collections of my parents and of my older brothers, which those are often very influential sounds when you're growing up, either to influence you to what to listen to or what to avoid. When the main part of my father's music collection was the Four Freshmen, okay, which to me was the corniest thing in existence. Now I've learned to love the Four Freshmen. I think they're amazing.
They were very influential, actually.
They were, oh yeah?
Yeah, among pop and rock artists, definitely, with the harmonies.
Yeah. Check out the Four Freshmen if you don't know the Four Freshmen. But like pretty middle of the road, like white, like cultureless music. I mean, pretty milquetoast.
What about your brothers? What music?
So my brothers were, I have two brothers. One is a policeman and one is a lawyer. Okay? And they're as different as that, as people. And the policeman loved heavy metal and like Black Sabbath and Bon Jovi and stuff like that.
He had the Sabbath in there.
There you go. Yeah.
Jewish part.
And the other brother, the lawyer, was into actually kind of, before it was called indie rock, like REM, when Michael Stipe still couldn't be understood, when you still couldn't decipher his lyrics. And Tom Waits and David Byrne, who had sort of his whole label of Luwaka Bop and Brazilian music. So that sort of got me into Brazilian music. And I do like the heavy metal too, I must say, Van Halen and stuff like that. And my parents, Four Freshmen, but they were diplomats. My dad was a diplomat, and he was stationed in Chile. Actually, during the coup, they were in Chile in the 70s. And actually, that's a very interesting story. If you look up Mark Dolgin, Chile, you'll see the incredible adventure that they had, like basically smuggling people out of Chile through the Canadian embassy. They saved many lives, and he was the first secretary at the embassy during that time, and like had people hiding in the residence, and they had these sort of secret planes that they smuggled people that were going to disappear otherwise. They were smuggled to Canada. So that was before I was born. That was in the early 70s. And before that, they were in Russia. They were in Moscow in the 60s. So their record collection sort of reflected that a bit. They had a bunch of Russian music. They had a bunch of music from South America. And then for freshmen. And then Theodore Bikel records. Theodore Bikel was the one Yiddish artist that somehow snuck through into mainstream assimilated Jewish life. Aside from that, not a Yiddish record to be seen. But I remember loving that Theodore Bikel record as a kid. And now looking at all those styles, I see that at least it sort of got me thinking about styles of music, not just pop and rock on the radio. It was world music, and it was Tom Waits, and it was all these things. And so I started to participate with that and playing in these world music bands. And then I got into hip hop. And hip hop is all about vinyl and records and sampling. So in high school, and hip hop was the sort of vibrant music of the early 90s or whatever. And it was underground at the time. In the early 90s, not necessarily underground, but it wasn't the dominant sound. Now hip hop is everything. It's all pop music is hip hop. Country music is hip hop. Like literally everything on mainstream radio, like pop is hip hop. It's beats, samples, machines, computers making the sounds. And in the early 90s, that's just not how music was made. Like pop didn't have a little drum machine beat in it. Like that was, sure, that started to happen in the 80s, I guess, and with things like Michael Jackson and stuff, they started to use drum machines in production. But in the early 90s, it was this sample-based production style.
And what was it about that attracted you?
It's a visceral, weird, young teenager thing that whatever you are listening to at that age with your friends that you think is cool and that you think maybe you've discovered sort of on your own that isn't the most popular sound, and you sort of dug it out, but it's still current. What I loved about hip hop, okay, well, first of all, I loved funk. All those records that my brothers that my brothers had and my parents had, that was a lot of styles, but I wanted to sort of establish my own musical identity or just have my own taste. And so I started buying my own records. And actually I got a tape from a friend of one of my brothers of James Brown. And specifically the JBs, which was James Brown's band, made up of Fred Wesley, Maceo Parker, and Pee Wee Ellis, and Clyde Stubblefield. And anyway, it's pure funk. This is early 70s, and this became the soundtrack of my life, and it became my favorite kind of music, just pure funk. And from that, I got into James Brown proper. James Brown, The Payback. I don't know if you know that song. It doesn't get much better than that. And then, of course, moving on from there, Parliament Funkadelic, and the Meters, and just and Sly and the Family Stone. And I for some reason, I was into funky music. And then I heard hip hop, which was funky music, but from today. And I was, this white Jewish kid in Quebec, an Anglophone in a French province, a Jew in a secular province. Ha ha. We all know how secular Quebec is, but but I was always kind of an outsider already, and somehow I just glommed onto hip hop, and me and my friends, it spoke to us. I don't know why. I also liked the political sort of element of it, especially earlier hip hop. It was more, at least talking about. I mean, it kind of comes and goes in waves, hip hop, with its politicization, and right now it's actually kind of getting political again. But back then, with Public Enemy or even the Wu-Tang Clan, just like talking about the state of affairs. And so I started. I met this young rapper from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Dartmouth, Nova Scotia is a really interesting part of Canada. It's sort of a suburb of Halifax, and actually it's where the Underground Railroad kind of ended up. And there was a town called Africville that is not talked about, frankly, in Canadian history, but it was this like bustling, vital little community of escaped African American slaves. And at some point in the 50s or 60s, basically Halifax like bulldozed it, like just sort of like they turned it into whatever, some industry. They needed it for something, and it was destroyed. All the people, the community, the churches, all the people had to move, but there's still like vestiges of that community. So I met this kid. I was in a gospel band, and the bass player from the gospel band said, "Hey, you got to meet my cousin. You're getting into rap. You should talk to my cousin. He's a rapper." And so we started working together, and we made a couple records together, and it felt real too. It felt like I could participate because he was coming from a very real place with hip hop and the hip hop culture. And I started working with other hip hop groups in Ottawa, and getting into sampling, which is taking sounds from old records. Like you actually digitally grab an actual sound from an old record.
Can I just pause you right there? Because I'm curious about this early collaboration with rappers and hip hop groups. Did you feel that you were accepted into, did you feel comfortable?
Well, I mean, I was already in a gospel band. And it was a hardcore gospel band, and I was this little white kid in this all not white gospel band. I was in a salsa band with all guys from Colombia. So I was kind of used to being accepted if I had the skills to pay the bills. And to communicate through music. Music became the sort of way to meet cool, different people. And also as always feeling like an outsider anyway. So it's just like, okay, this is just more of the same. Right. More of being a little bit different. But in Canada, I sort of had rose-colored glasses growing up in this little town, feeling like it was okay to be Jewish and be the only Jewish kid in my school. It was okay to be Anglophone. And it felt like I was naive, and I didn't see the white supremacy of Canada, and it wasn't so obvious, and the sort of the privilege that I had. Now we just talk about it more, and there's more sort of these ideas are shared, and we're sort of facing the music a little bit in Canada right now. But growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was just like, oh, I'm different and it's okay. So I started to get into sampling, which is, that's what hip hop started with. Okay, in 20 words or less, the history of hip hop. DJs from Jamaica started mixing records in New York City, parks, taking their sort of sound system tradition from Jamaica. And really all the founding DJs of hip hop were either born in Jamaica or their parents were from Jamaica. And these DJs started to have these block parties using turntables. And then the technology evolved with the turntables that they could mix between the records easily. And then they started to loop certain parts of the records because they saw people were dancing to, they didn't want the whole disco song. They just wanted this one funky little moment of the disco song where everything stops except for the beat. And so there's like just 4 measures of this funky beat, and that was called a break. They started just collecting these breaks and looping these breaks. And by looping, I mean either manually with 2 turntables and like beat juggling the break back and forth. You can all look up the history of hip hop. We're going to talk about Yiddish any minute, I swear. So they start. They got these loops happening. They're dancing to the break. Okay, that's where break dancing comes from. So they invented this whole new style of dancing. Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm scared what's going to come. Let's see what happens. Okay. We're on random, friends. It could get nasty. So they're dancing to the break. That's where break dancing comes from. The DJ thing is the musical element. Hip hop is a culture. It includes all the arts. There's the music, which is DJ. There's the dance, break dancing. There's the visual art element, which is graffiti. And then there's the sort of poetic art, the literary art, which is rapping and the emceeing and the rhyming. And all of those arts, the DJing, all of this thing, they all became incredibly sophisticated and virtuosic, and they are to this day being practiced and learned around the world, and hip hop has become a world phenomenon. And it all started with these breaks. So I started to collect records. We're getting to why I'm here. Any minute. Any second now. And I started to collect these old records. Uh-oh. Chelsea is my hometown. Okay. Anyway, these are all my photographs, and we're going to talk maybe a little bit about what I did during the pandemic, which was a lot of not music and sort of a lot of photography and art and just trying to not go insane. So I started to collect old records, and at this time I also moved to Montreal to go to school. I went to school at McGill, and I studied philosophy and literature, and I started to collect old records, and I started to find Jewish music in these I should probably stop it. That's Christopher Tolkien. Oh, he's cool. Okay, I'm just going to go like this. There we go. You're a very lovely, patient, and open audience. I appreciate it. I found this record. Aaron Lebedeff sings 15 Yiddish theater classics. Okay? This was at a time when everyone was throwing out their records. They thought CDs had come to save the day. And so you would find full record collections in the garbage and in Salvation Armies and in the basement of a church or a synagogue. People were just jettisoning them. So, and as a person who grew up in the CD era, you would either pay $25 for a CD or 25 cents for some weird record. Okay, I stopped buying CDs. And you could buy literally 100 records for the cost of a CD or whatever. So you could experiment. You could just try it. You didn't need to know, okay, I'm really going to invest in this thing. It's going to work. It's going to take me 3 hours to make the money to buy the CD. No, you just go and grab garbage. It's garbage. And in a way, hip hop is all about that, taking garbage and turning garbage into gold. Basically, all those arts that I just mentioned, breakdancing, it's like you're dancing. You don't need a ballet stage. You just need a piece of cardboard on the sidewalk, and then you can turn into the greatest dancer in the world. You don't need your wall is ugly in the town you live in, so you paint it and make it beautiful. It's like it's really working with what you've got, and yeah. So I started to find old records, looking for samples, looking for breaks. And lo and behold, I take home the Aaron Lebedeff record, and between each verse in the song, there's this funky little breakdown, a little riff that was basically begging to be sampled and looped. And I'm sure in 1917, when he recorded it, he did not imagine that happening. I don't think they thought that through exactly. And also, as a person sampling, I didn't want to be sued. and I wanted to okay, so first of all, I didn't want to be sued, and so I was looking for weird sounds that nobody would ever catch me using. and so this Aaron Lebedev records, I was like, who's ever heard of Aaron Lebedev? Come on. Like, I had no idea about the klezmer revival movement. I had a slight idea. I'd heard maybe a klezmatics record, and there was a band from Winnipeg called Finjan that was like one of the first revival bands, and I actually heard that growing up, and I actually liked that. But I wasn't in the movement. Like, that wasn't how I got into it. It was through finding Aaron Lebedev, the record. And then, so I was looking for samples, and at first, it was also cool because it was like, I didn't want to just be the guy, this white cultural appropriator, stealing from black culture and sampling the meters and sampling James Brown like what hip-hop is. I mean, most of real hip-hop comes, and that's sort of part of even the Jamaican tradition of like referencing older versions of songs and referencing and honoring the culture by doing new versions of songs and taking, and like the early hip hop producers were that too. They were taking early funky songs and remixing them and making them relevant for the day. Well, I was this Jewish kid, and I knew that hip hop is about representing where you're from. I mean, that's a cornerstone of the hip hop philosophy, is like you represent. So I found this music that was from my culture, but it was from a culture I had no idea about. So I also felt sort of like an interloper and like a cultural appropriator of my own culture, but I'd never heard this stuff before, and it made me sort of angry, actually, and confused, perplexed. Why was there this awesome music that I'd never heard growing up? Why had I grown up going to synagogue and thinking that the music was terrible? Reform synagogue with an organist playing this cheesy, like folk music or whatever, like American folk music, like just corny. It wasn't funky. Sure, the singing from the Torah was beautiful, and the trope and learning that for a bar mitzvah, that was musically very interesting and felt like something ancient and magical and incredible. But the music of the Jews, to me, was Theodore Bikel, Fiddler on the Roof, and that's it. Like, and Finjan kind of a little bit growing up. But like, I had no idea. This was before the internet too, obviously. So I find this record of Aaron Lebedev. I sample the break. I make a beat for my rapper guy from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and he goes, dope, like awesome, like okay, and he made a track and he recorded on it, and he didn't really think about, oh, where's that from, or he didn't care. He just liked that it was a funky beat.
How easy or quickly is it that you could access that? Do you have something that we could hear?
I don't know if I have that record on here. Let me see. Oh, I kind of do.
Jingle, psycho, so-called. I prance the facts of hell disposition with 9 pearl.
We were teenagers.
What say you, Sir Sheriff? My lords, you'll find my loyalty will meet the test.
I follow virtue, nigga.
Bring forth my cover.
I'll defend Christie's secret to my dying days. And when morning paints the sky, my afternoon niggas gaze. For the tides remain aligned, these nights I slowly blaze.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, that's from some random Jewish record, okay? And then I found, okay, Aaron Lebedev, Yiddish theater, interesting. Kept digging. Okay, here's Nigunim, like beautiful, Lubavitch Nigunim, Volume 3, okay? Nechoach, do you know Nechoach? There's these compilations of Nigunim. It's actually all online now on Chabad.org, which is my only reason to go to Chabad.org, is because they have like 20 volumes of Nigunim, which are amazing. And actually, the resource is incredible because it has the recording, it has the transcription of the song, it has the words, if there are any, to these wordless melodies. It has the story of the niggin who wrote it. But for me, it was by the way, I'm living now in Montreal in a Hasidic part of town. So all around me are the Belzers and the Bobovers and the Mudenkatch and the Lubavitch and they're like little stiebels on my street. There's like 7 different type of Lubavitch, not Lubavitch, 7 different types of Hasidim on my street. And I'm hearing nigunim coming from their well, especially in Sukkot, where they're outside and they're singing in their sukkahs. So, okay, wow, nigunim, these melodies, okay, Hasidic music, interesting. Okay, then I find a Mickey Katz record. Okay, what's this all about? Okay, then I got the Don Byron version of the Mickey Katz record, and I was like, well, this is cool, but wow, listen to this old version. It's like just brimming with vitality, and it's just incredible virtuosic musicianship. Okay, so, and then I find a Dave Terrace record. So that's klezmer, right? This American version of this Eastern European Jewish dance music. And all of it was full of sampleable, catchy little things that I could use in the hip hop. And so I did. And I made these first records, even adding to that, like some children's records that I did grow up with. So I had some really corny 50s children's records that were my mom's, actually. Like Mother Goose. Remember that Mother Goose? Yeah, people here? You know what I'm saying. Okay. So, and they have these corny little like narrators, like, it's time to put the sukkah up, Yankel. It's terrible. But hip hop has tons of that stuff, like sampling funny little intros and stuff. Like Prince Paul is a good example of a producer who used to do that a lot. Or the RZA, I guess, but he took from from kung fu movies. So I started to make it into stuff, and I made stuff, and it's a long story about how I basically gave what I'd done to David Krakauer at a klezmer camp. So eventually, I live in Montreal, and eventually I started going to Klez Canada. And the first time I went was, by the way, you've only asked me one question so far.
This is it. This is the easiest interview I've ever done. Just push play.
I feel like you haven't really earned your keep yet. So
I was waiting just for a pause, but
okay.
Keep going.
Okay, I'll try to finish this thought, okay? Because
then it's Q&A time.
Because we're almost done. And you haven't seen anything. Anyway, so I got into making this weird new hip hop mixed with Yiddish music, klezmer, nigunim, and Yiddish theater, and just in my basement. This was before the internet, and I started making weird productions, and then I made like a little EP just that I made myself, and I gave it to. Okay, so my cousin said, "Hey, there's this thing called Klez Canada. Do you want to go? It's this Yiddish culture festival in Montreal." I was like, "No, I don't want to go to that. That sounds horrible. Are you crazy? I'm a hip hop guy. Like I go to techno raves. I party. Like I'm like I don't want to go where they're gonna be wearing hats and vests and like doing weird dancing around eating terrible kosher food. I was never really part of the Jewish world. I never felt really comfortable at my synagogue necessarily. I was never terribly religious. So to be a part of some official Jewish community, no. I kind of liked being the outsider, I think. And in Montreal, going to university, it was just like a community of just everybody. It wasn't about one kind of person, or culturally or ethnically or linguistically. It was like people from all over the world, and everybody was really getting along, and I loved that about Montreal and about the 21st century. So to go to some weird insular little world, well, I thought, okay, I'll go so that I can record stuff, and maybe I can find samples while I'm there. And also as an excuse to get the cousins together. So the cousins, we went to this thing, and we go to this place, and sure enough, there's people in hats and vests, and they're doing the dance, and there's terrible kosher food, but at night there were concerts, and there were these incredible musicians playing their asses off, and they were playing the music that I'd heard on these old records only. So they were singing Yiddish theater songs. Here's a song from Aaron Lebedev. What? Somebody, oh no, now I'm going to get sued. Oh no, people all know about Aaron Lebedev apparently. But but it was exciting, and it was like, it felt like coming home and meeting these, and then I was 19 or 20, and I wasn't part of the scene at all, and I wasn't part of, and to me these bands like Brave Old World with Michael Alpert and Stu Brotman and Frank London and these figures that I was watching on the stage, they were a world away. I didn't think, oh, I'll ever be a part of that world, all I could think was, holy Jesus Christ.
Holy Moses.
You know in the Aaron Lebedev record, Chazandul of Shabbos, they actually edited out, there's like the punchline of the whole song. He goes, holy Moses, Jesus Christ, is that a chazan? Okay? And it's a version of this song. There's many versions of this folk song about these two guys talking about a chazan who comes to town. Anyway, but in the vinyl that I have, it was a reissue of a 78, and they actually edited it out. So it goes, holy Moses, is das a chazan? So I only found it on a 78, on the original, where the Jesus Christ was. Anyway, so these musicians were so incredible. Like, they were just, the musicianship is really what got me, and the sensitivity and the attention to detail and the attention to the arrangements and the repertoire. It started to blow my mind. Adrian Cooper, the singers were just incredible. And the most key person that I met that first year was Elaine Hoffman Watts, who was a drummer from Philadelphia. And she played a bulgar, this traditional dance rhythm that she'd learned from her father, who was in these famous Philadelphia klezmer orchestras in the teens and 20s. And he was actually in the Philadelphia Orchestra. He was the percussionist for the Philadelphia Orchestra, an incredible virtuoso musician. He played the vibes and like whatever, timpani, he played all percussion. But at home, he played klezmer, and he taught his daughter how to play the drums. And she was at Klez Canada, and her beat just changed my life. Like, just to hear a beat that was as funky as any funky drummer from the James Brown band, but it was from this Eastern European culture of my grandparents. You know, they came from Ukraine and Romania and she came from the same place, and she was so cool. She was 5 feet tall and just like this shit-talking, amazing musician. And her daughter, of course, is Susan Hoffman Watts, one of the great trumpeters in the scene. And so I met her, and I thought, wow, we have our own funk, we have our own beat, we have this. There's something to this. This is cool. So I ended up recording a lot, and I recorded her a lot to loop, to use her beat in new kinds of ways. And then the year after that, I came back, and like I had stuff that I'd built with the real sounds from Klez Canada. I gave it to David Krakauer, who was, one of the great clarinetists now in klezmer and in klezmer fusion, and he loved it, and he invited me, and that sort of became the beginning of my story. That's the beginning of the story.
And we're out of time.
And we're out of time. Thank you. But it's sort of really annoying to be asked that question because I have to go through all that to get to the answer to the question of how I got here and where it all started and stuff. But it ignores the 25 years that happened since I started. Like, so since then, I've done some cool stuff that I'd love to tell you about. But I never get a chance to tell you about any of that. because now you just know what I did when I was 20. Yes, sir. I didn't really understand the second question.
Okay, Tom Lehrer.
Tom Lehrer. Okay, so Tom Lehrer, we had a family tradition. Every New Year's Eve, we listened to An Evening Wasted with Tom Lehrer. Like every year, to this day, we still listen to that whole record. Love him, he's still alive, he's very old, and I wish we would get him somewhere. I wish we could hang out with him and talk to him about Yiddish and stuff. It would be so cool. Theodore Bikel, I had the honor of meeting. Actually, we met in Poland at the Krakauer festival, and then we became. He showed up at one of my gigs in Los Angeles, and he showed up at one of my gigs, and I had this beat, and I said, "Theo, you want to come and sing Mein Städtele Bells over this beat?" And he said, "Well, sure, I guess I could try that." All right? And he came up on stage, and I dropped the beat, and he like sang like to a funky, fat hip hop beat. He sang it, and it was okay. Yeah, that I might have a bit of.
That would be a great little sound.
So in the end, I said, let's record that. And so at another klezmer festival in San Francisco, we were both there at the same time. We went to a studio, and he.
I'm a universalist.
Yeah.
I believe in the family of man. I believe in the brotherhood of man.
Bro!
I'm curious about my neighbor. I hope he's curious about me. I sing Jewish songs. Well, actually, I sing in 21 languages I sing of many cultures, but I sing Jewish songs not because they are better songs than the songs of my neighbor. I sing them because they're mine. And unless I sing them, that part of the culture will vanish, and that wonderful meadow with proliferating flowers, with a profusion of flowers, will have the Jewish flower missing. That's why I sing Jewish songs. Als jeder Mann sich in meine Kinderjahr und wie ein Cholem wird mir alles klar. Wie seht euch durch die Ballet, oh, es hat geglanzt, oh, und das Beimale, was ich hab es verpflanzt, oi, 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 Belz.
Yeah! Yeah!
Mein Städtele Belz.
Yeah!
Mein Hey.
You'll have to go listen to it if you haven't heard it. And that little talk, like I just asked him on the mic, I said, "Why do you sing Jewish songs?" And he gave me that perfectly enunciated, just like brilliant little spiel. What an incredible guy. So we ended up working together on other things too. He came to Montreal after his incredible wife, Tamara, had passed away, and he needed a piano player because she was his accompanist. And it was the last minute thing. He had this show, so she couldn't, she just passed away. He asked me to do it, so I ended up hanging out with him for like a real month, like rehearsing and doing the show every night and eating out. He came to my apartment and listening to records, and it was an actual kind of friendship that developed out of that. And I've met so many cool people in my little journey, that I've got to work with many legends and legends to come, legends to be.
And you mentioned early on, one of your very first funk albums was the JBs, and which included Fred Wesley.
Yeah.
And then you wind up 30 years later.
Yeah. So Fred Wesley, like I said, my favorite kind of music was funk and the JBs. Well, I've now been working with Fred Wesley from the JBs for over 10 years, almost 15 years, with a project called Abraham Incorporated, which there's no time to play you things, but Abraham Incorporated took David Krakauer and his klezmer with Fred Wesley and his funk. And he's really the architect and inventor of funk. we sent him music. We said, hey, Fred Wesley, we heard he was still active. We said, Fred, would you be interested in trying to deal with Jewish dance music? and he said, yeah. He said, I mean, we sent him old recordings from the 1920s, and he said, this is incredible music. Like, this is very interesting. This guy worked with Count Basie and Ray Charles and Ike and Tina Turner and Bernie Worrell and James Brown, but he's so open musically that he could hear, you know, a Jewish orchestra from the 1920s and think, that's pretty cool. Maybe there's something in that. So he was, so from that first project of Abraham Incorporated, we made a record and toured that. We actually just made our second record last year, which was surprising that it's still going on. He just turned 79 on July 4th. I mean, he's a July 4th guy. And he's still into it, and we've also worked together on other cool things. I did a musical, a Yiddish musical called Tales from Odessa. I asked Fred Wesley to write the overture for me. So he wrote the overture for a Yiddish musical with a cymbalom in it. Like, he wrote a part for cymbalom. And then I've asked him to write, I've done a bunch of other musicals, and I've asked him to, he's written the overture for all my musicals. And then he guests with me, I've guested with him. Anyway, so yeah, that's thrilling. And it's because I found my voice in hip-hop and to find my own culture in hip-hop. Through hip-hop, I found this Yiddish music that gave me something to share and something for people to, something to share in the world of music, you know, and try to share this music with new audiences and get people to hear these sounds that they, unless you're part of this amazing community of people that are really, really into it, it's hard to get it out, to bust out of that. My first record was called Ghetto Blaster, which was a play on the word of the ghetto blaster, obviously, which is, you know, central to hip-hop culture, but also to blast out of these, of all style ghettos, and to blast, and of course, the first ghetto was the Jewish part of town in Venice. The word ghetto comes from there. So that's sort of been my mission, and like I said, I don't get to tell you about where I am now because I just got to tell you how I got to where I started. But I'm sort of less, yeah, no, it's a dialogue of being really traditional sometimes, and oh, that's maybe in closing, I'd just like to say that I started by sampling these old records and just looking for sounds that I could use in hip hop, but in the end I fell in love with the music, and I wanted to participate in just in that music, and as a pianist, accordionist, or as a singer. And so now I'm singing the songs and I'm playing the music. I just did a gig last week of just playing traditional klezmer piano in a klezmer trio. And I'll play a bar mitzvah or a wedding. And tomorrow I'm going to do a whole solo Yiddish song show, which is insane. Like, like if you told me 10 years ago that you would be at the Yiddish Book Center singing a solo Yiddish, all Yiddish program, and you're just you, like, I'm just going to be playing piano and singing this, I would have thought you were crazy. And you are crazy. And
No, you are crazy.
I'm crazy. And yeah, and there's so much cool stuff here. I hope you have a great festival. There's some amazing concerts tonight. And maybe you'll come tomorrow as you see me having a heart attack trying to do a solo Yiddish show. Thank you for coming. All right. Yeah.
Josh Dolgin. Josh Dolgin. Thank you so much.
Thank
Josh.
you. Yo, we didn't really have much time for questions, but I'm around, so please come and say hi and ask me anything you want.
But not in this room. Clear the room and get him
Clear the room.
outside.